You may have seen this headline. Even the award-winning work from Renews, the youth brand news outlet for TVNZ, it hasn't stopped it from going the way of a number of other local media that we've seen over the past few years. Next week, the news outlet will close down after about a decade of operation. The reason? Well, the current line is commercial viability, and that's been the repeat reason for the closure of media nationwide for the last few years, and I don't dispute that for a second. But every time we lose another media outlet, we lose another tool to hold power to account and keeping the public informed. And with our coalition government clearly stepping over the line between political interference and shareholder feedback, tying commercial metrics to public broadcasting mandates and arguing in a circular logic around media trust, it's creating a noticeable ripple effect. David Seymour's Q&A session on Sunday showed that that's his attitude. These text messages between Paul Goldsmith, the broadcasting minister, and Christopher Luxon show pressure clearly being put on One News political reporters to showcase their spin and perspective over accuracy and fairness. And that way the budgets have been slashed from public journalism after complaints from high-ranking government MPs like Winston Peters complaining that they don't like the way they're being held to account. Well, it's all been picked up by an organisation called Journalists Without Borders in their annual Media Freedom Report, where we've ranked the lowest we have ever ranked. Again. This year, we're at number 22, the first time we've ever dropped below the top 20 and a far cry from the 2016 ranking of number 5 in the world. The organisation points out that across the region, authoritarian regimes are using fear from terrorism or cybersecurity threats and more to create and exploit tools that limit press freedom. In an Aotearoa context, they point specifically to comments from Winston Peters threatening media organisations, including themselves, that the Prime Minister wouldn't decry as a partial reason for the drop in rankings. They say our media landscape's deteriorated due to society's growing polarisation. A polarisation exacerbated by decisions like removing the Broadcasting Standards Authority and refusing to hold hard right and disinformation peddling media outlets to account because they further the coalition's agenda. They point out that the coalition's repression of elements that make us a truly multicultural society, like the promotion and integration of Te Reo Māori, is problematic, and that since 2023 the risks of threats and violence against journalists have reached all-time highs, which puts the country at risk of mob censorship and vigilante discipline, with women being the most affected by online abuse. Now here's the thing. There are clearly a lot of factors at play in this, and the big one is the economic realities that are leading to massive closures. We're seeing large local news deserts from the loss of regional media. Part of that actually helped a record number of conspiracy theorists get elected in 2025 at the local body elections. We're also seeing major national outlets struggling because they're not all being bought up by Canadian billionaires who want to make the Herald and News Talk less woke, while funding for public media is being slashed and the current people in charge are happy to threaten and control those media outlets to get what they want.
Should that process be transparent and disclosed?
Well, I'd be careful saying that, John.
Or play the victim when they're held to account, while broadcasters who actively spread disinformation and bullshit that eats away at social cohesion and puts people in harm's way in all kinds of ways run their own surveys by discredited organisations to back up what they want to hear, and they peddle that as actual news. But there are also actions that our government could do to improve this score. Reinstating the Broadcasting Standards Authority and expanding and clearly defining its remit for the 21st century is a really big one. Doing something with the Fair Digital News Bargaining Bill, which would force big tech companies to pay for local media, can help with cost issues. Speeding up bureaucratic processes like OIAs so that they're not being reported on after public interest has moved on, or limiting their relevance and banning strategic lawsuits like what we saw with the Herald owner paying for against One News earlier this year. They could all do something to help our media organisations and this trust score. But we as audiences also need to take a bit of responsibility here. It costs to produce news, to pay the people involved, to do the research. That used to be paid for with advertising, TV commercials, newspaper ads, radio ads, and that's nowhere near the earner that it used to be, since our media diet has changed. And I know not everyone can afford to pay for news media in other ways, like directly, but if you can, finding outlets you support that aren't owned by conspiracy peddling hard-right Canadian billionaires funded by mysterious weirdos or telling you vaccines are bad but migrants are worse, supporting them can be really helpful. Sharing their content on platforms that they get built-in advertising revenue from can also help if they're monetized on places like Meta or YouTube, for example. Watching and sharing their content on those platforms can also help with income a bit. If you have an ad blocker, maybe look at removing them from the block list. Something as simple as opening a link instead of reading an article on a social media page can help in a small way. But we don't always agree that media gets it right, and there is absolutely issues around media bias and media trust that we need to deal with. But having no media is a far more dangerous prospect. Without media, there'd be no coverage on how smoking and now environmental lobby groups seemingly had word-for-word influence in policy decisions and law changes. We wouldn't know that Winston and Christopher Luxon seem to bicker around foreign policy so much, or that the Prime Minister feels he is entitled to his entitlements, and so does his minister in charge of making sure people don't get emergency accommodation who does like to get her own benefits for accommodation. We wouldn't know so much about the Treaty Principles Bill, we wouldn't have had the coverage, and it may even have gone through. We wouldn't be able to track the 10,000 public service jobs that have already gone, or know about the further 9,000 that are being proposed to be replaced with AI. We wouldn't know about the highest number of unemployed people that we've ever had, record number of people needing benefits, or the record number of people fleeing the country, the record number of business closures, and so on, because media keeps us informed as things unfold around us. And we could make it better. I mean, it won't happen under this coalition, but it could be done by any government with the will to see how important media actually is, and was willing to work towards ensuring it serves the public well. Oh, hey there, podcast listeners. Thanks for checking out today's podcast, whether that's on video or audio. I really appreciate it. And I did finally get around to doing a podcast end tag, which I've been meaning to do for a while instead of just taking you onto the Facebook version. So while you're here, why not hit that subscribe button so that you can get updates coming in directly every time there's a new episode uploaded. Just seems like a really simple way to keep up to date with all of the crazy that's going on. So yeah, give that a shot, and I'll talk to you soon.